In a world where noise dominates, silence is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for weakness, for indecision, for absence. But in truth, silence is a sign of presence, of awareness, of power that does not need to announce itself. The one who is silent is not always the one who has nothing to say, but often the one who has understood that not everything needs to be spoken. Noise is everywhere. It is in our devices, in our conversations, in our thoughts. The modern world encourages expression in every form, but very few are taught how to truly listen. Not only to others, but to themselves. In that silence, between the thoughts, between the breaths, between the movements of the outer world, lies a strength that cannot be found in words. Silence becomes not a void, but a vessel, not emptiness, but potential. To cultivate silence is to choose presence. When the mouth is quiet, the ears begin to open. When the ears are open, the mind starts to settle. When the mind settles, what was once hidden becomes visible. In this way, silence becomes the doorway to clarity. It allows one to observe without interference, to act without impulsiveness, and to decide without confusion. It is through silence that one begins to see beyond the surface of things. True silence is not the absence of sound. It is the stillness of inner noise. You may be in the middle of a crowd, in the center of a chaotic environment, and still be silent within. Likewise, you may be alone in a quiet room, but the storm of your thoughts makes it louder than any marketplace. This silence we speak of is not external, it is internal. It is cultivated through self-discipline, awareness, and practice. When a person remains silent, especially in situations where others expect a reaction, they exhibit a form of mastery. Silence in those moments is not submission. It is control. It is the refusal to let others dictate your energy. It is knowing that you are not obligated to react just because someone demands it. The mind that is strong does not need to respond immediately. It observes, it weighs, it understands. Then, when the time is right, it speaks or chooses not to. The path of self-mastery is not walked through argument or volume. It is walked in the quiet training of the self. It is walked in moments when you could defend, but instead you let go. When you could speak, but you decide to listen. When you could prove, but instead you remain still. There is more strength in restraint than in expression, more clarity in quiet than in chaos. Look at the great forces of nature. The mountain does not need to move to be powerful. The ocean does not need to shout to be heard. The moon does not need to prove its presence to affect the tides. These elements are strong because they are in harmony with their essence. They do not react, they simply exist in alignment. The same is true for human beings. When one is aligned inwardly, when one no longer needs validation from the outer world, silence becomes natural. Many people seek to be heard before they have truly understood themselves. But if you speak before understanding, your words become noise. They may be loud, they may be passionate, but they lack direction. Silence, in contrast, gives you the space to hear your own thoughts before releasing them into the world. It is through silence that thoughts are organized, emotions are processed, and energy is conserved. And what is conserved can then be directed with purpose. Silence is a form of protection. Not every situation deserves your voice. Not every confrontation requires your participation. When you speak, you give away energy. When you remain silent, you gather it. Silence allows you to hold your position without exposing your intentions. It allows you to preserve your strength without needing to prove anything. In this way, silence becomes a weapon, not to harm, but to defend. Not to attack, but to preserve clarity. To be silent is also to listen deeply, not only to others, but to the subtle movements within yourself. The breath, the heartbeat, the flickers of intuition. In the space of silence, these inner voices become louder. You begin to hear what you were too distracted to notice. You begin to sense what was drowned out by overthinking. In this way, silence becomes a teacher, a companion, a guide. There is a form of discipline in silence. It takes effort to withhold unnecessary words, to resist the temptation to explain, to defend, to correct. It requires the ability to sit with discomfort, to allow emotion to rise without expressing them prematurely. And in that restraint, you begin to notice how quickly thoughts come and go, how most of them are not permanent, how silence creates distance between you and your reactions. That distance is awareness. That awareness is strength. Many times, the urge to speak comes from insecurity, not knowing, not trusting, needing to control the perception of others. Silence, however, arises from a place of stability, when you no longer need to prove your worth, when you are no longer attached to outcome, when you begin to value inner peace over outward approval. Silence becomes not just possible, it becomes preferable. Silence is also a space of transformation. In the same way that seeds grow underground, in darkness and quiet, transformation within you begins when you step away from distraction and return to yourself. That silence becomes the fertile ground where insight grows, where clarity emerges, where the next step becomes visible, not because you chased it, but because you created space for it to arrive. The more one develops this relationship with silence, the more one understands how much noise is unnecessary. Conversations that lead nowhere, arguments that steal energy, thoughts that loop endlessly, these begin to fall away when silence becomes your companion. And what remains is focus. What remains is power. What remains is clarity. Because what was scattered is now gathered. What was loud is now still. What was chaotic is now ordered. Through silence, through strength, through presence. Would you like a continuation or adaptation of this into a video script or voiceover narration? In the practice of self-mastery, few tools are as powerful and as sharp as focus. Focus is not merely concentration, it is more refined, more disciplined. It is not just about paying attention, it is about choosing what not to pay attention to. In this way, focus becomes a blade, a sword, and like all swords, it must be forged, sharpened, and used with precision. The mind left to itself is like a forest overgrown. Thoughts pull in every direction. Desires compete, memories intrude, fears shout. The mind runs from one idea to the next, dragged by every sound, every stimulus, every urge. Without focus, the mind is not a master. It is a servant. It reacts. It follows. It is tossed about by every wave that passes. But when focus is cultivated, when the mental energy is gathered and directed, the mind becomes like a sword in the hands of a skilled warrior. Sharp, deliberate, and unstoppable. Focus cuts through distraction. In the same way a blade slices through rope, focus severs the ties that pull the mind into chaos. Every time you resist the temptation to divide your attention, every time you choose one task, one breath, one step, you are sharpening that sword. You are training the mind not to scatter its power across 1,000 insignificant things, but to channel its force into one deliberate movement. This is not something that happens by accident. Just as no sword sharpens itself, focus must be cultivated through discipline, through repetition, through returning again and again to what matters. The untrained mind resists this. It prefers novelty. It chases stimulation. It leaps from thought to thought, because in doing so, it avoids the discomfort of staying still. But comfort is not the goal. Clarity is. The one who is focused does not have more hours in the day. They do not have fewer challenges. They simply waste less energy. When the sword of the mind is dull, it takes more force to cut, more effort to move forward. But when it is honed, a single stroke accomplishes what 1,000 chaotic attempts cannot. In martial arts, you learn not only how to move, but how to hold your position, how to be still, how to act from the center. Focus is the same. It is not just about doing, it is about being centered while doing. The sharpest sword is not one that swings wildly. It is one that is still until it must move, and then moves with full force. Focus is that stillness. It is that precision. It is the restraint that holds back until the moment is right, and the intensity that follows when action is required. The world today does not reward silence. It does not reward stillness. It rewards noise, speed, distraction. But strength is not found in scattered energy. It is found in depth, in those who choose to go deeper into fewer things, to do less but with greater intention. The focused mind becomes impenetrable, unshaken, unbothered by the opinions of others. Not because it is arrogant, but because it is committed. Every day, the sword of the mind is either sharpened or dulled. It is sharpened by saying no. No to unnecessary distraction. No to the pool of instant gratification. No to what does not serve the path. It is sharpened by saying yes also, but only to what aligns. Yes to routines. Yes to patience. Yes to presence. Through this continual shaping, the blade becomes refined. And once refined, it begins to cut through illusions. Illusion is the greatest thief of energy. The illusion that we must do everything. The illusion that we must please everyone. The illusion that rest is weakness. The illusion that multitasking is strength. These are the beliefs that dull the sword, that fracture the attention, that make the mind heavy and scattered. But when focus returns, the illusions fall away. Truth remains. Purpose becomes visible. There is an ancient saying, Where the attention goes, energy flows. But most people do not realize how expensive their attention is. Every time you focus on something, you are feeding it, whether it is a thought, a feeling, a distraction, or a task. You are giving your energy to it, and what you feed will grow. The sword of the mind does not cut by force, it cuts by precision. It selects what is worthy of its edge and what is not. One must begin to ask, where am I placing my attention? Is it making me stronger or weaker? Is it bringing me closer to myself or further away? These questions act as the sharpening stone. They reveal the areas of leakage. They show you where the blade has grown dull and where it must be refined. A sword does not stay sharp by itself. It must be kept clean. It must be protected. So too with the mind. You cannot train the mind once and expect it to remain focused forever. Each day is a new battle, not always with the outer world, but often with the inner world. The battle to remain present, the battle to say no, the battle to stay with the breath, the battle to choose one thing over many. This is the path of the warrior, not one who fights others, but one who cuts through his own illusions, who conquers his own chaos, who disciplines the mind not to wander, not to waste, not to waver. When you walk with the sword of focus, you walk with strength, not because everything becomes easy, but because you are no longer scattered, because your power is gathered in one place, because your energy is not leaking into every passing distraction, because you have learned the art of deliberate attention, because the mind, like the sword, has become an instrument of precision rather than confusion. Let me know if you'd like the next keynote expanded to let go, to let flow. In the practice of inner discipline, one often encounters tension not from the outside world, but from within. This tension arises from attachment to outcomes, to control, to expectations, to identity. We hold on tightly to ideas, to emotions, to what we think should happen and how it should happen. And the more we hold, the more rigid we become. In this rigidity, flow cannot exist. Flow requires space, and space is only created when we let go. Letting go is not giving up. It is not surrendering your path. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that clinging is not the same as caring, that holding on too tightly often suffocates what we want to preserve. Like water held in a clenched fist, what is meant to be fluid becomes strained and eventually lost. The mind likes control. It seeks patterns. It searches for structure. But life, in its deeper rhythm, cannot always be structured. It does not always unfold according to plan. There is a rhythm that exists beyond logic, a pattern that reveals itself only when you stop trying to force it. Letting go means becoming still enough to notice that pattern. It is releasing the constant mental grip and allowing the natural current to carry you, not blindly, but with presence. This letting go is internal. It is not about abandoning effort. It is about releasing resistance. Resistance to change, resistance to discomfort, resistance to uncertainty. When we resist, we create friction within. That friction becomes tension in the body, stress in the mind, heaviness in the spirit. The more we try to control every variable, the more we exhaust ourselves. But when we let go of that need, we begin to move with life rather than against it. To let go is to loosen the mind's grasp, to allow space between stimulus and response. It is the art of non-attachment, not indifference, but clarity. Clarity that understands you can care deeply and still not cling. You can act with intention and still release expectation. You can work with discipline and still remain open to what comes. In martial arts, tension weakens technique. A punch thrown with too much muscle is slow, rigid, and predictable. But when the body is loose, when the breath is flowing, when the mind is calm, the movement becomes faster, more accurate, more fluid. The same principle applies to the mind. A rigid mind cannot adapt. A rigid mind cannot see clearly. But a mind that has let go of the unnecessary becomes receptive. It perceives more. It moves better. Letting go also means releasing identity. So much of our suffering comes from holding on to a fixed idea of who we are. We tell ourselves, I am this kind of person, or this is how things should be for me. And when life challenges that identity, we resist. But who we are is not fixed. Identity is fluid. Just as water takes the shape of any vessel, the self is meant to evolve. When we let go of labels, of rigid definitions, of old stories, we create space for transformation. Many carry emotional weight from the past. Grudges, regrets, unresolved thoughts. These become blockages. Just as a river becomes obstructed by debris, the inner flow is blocked by what we refuse to release. To let go is to acknowledge what was, to accept it without needing to relive it, and to allow it to pass through. What is not processed becomes stored, and what is stored becomes heavy. Letting go lightens the load. It restores movement where there was stagnation. There is a paradox in effort. When effort is tight, desperate, and controlling, it becomes counterproductive. But when effort is focused, balanced, and free of attachment to results, it becomes powerful. This is the difference between pushing water uphill and digging a channel for it to flow downward. One exhausts, the other aligns. Letting go does not mean stopping effort. It means aligning effort with the natural direction of movement. Letting go of comparison is also essential. In constantly measuring yourself against others, you disrupt your own rhythm. You place yourself in a race that has no finish line. Everyone moves at their own pace. To flow, you must return to your own breath, your own steps, your own journey. The tree does not rush because another tree has bloomed. It trusts the season. It trusts the process. And in doing so, it grows fully into what it was always meant to be. There is also the subtle holding on to fear. Fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being enough. These fears, when not released, shape our actions, limit our choices, narrow our vision. Letting go of fear does not mean feeling no fear. It means acknowledging it without obeying it. It means stepping forward even while it whispers. Flow cannot coexist with fear's grip, for flow requires openness. Trust, a willingness to not know what's next and move anyway. In stillness, you begin to sense when you are holding too tightly. The breath shortens, the thoughts become repetitive. The shoulders tense. The heart feels closed. These are signals not of weakness, but of opportunity. Opportunity to pause, to breathe, to observe what you are clinging to and why. To choose release over resistance. Not to escape life, but to merge with it more fully. Letting go requires presence. Not thinking about letting go, not talking about it, but being in it. Experiencing what it feels like in the body, in the mind. It requires trust, not in outcomes, but in the process. Trust that what is meant for you will not require you to force. Trust that space creates possibility. Trust that when you stop grasping, your hands are finally open to receive. Let me know if you'd like the next one. The inner world creates the outer reality, expanded the same way. There is a principle so subtle that most do not notice it, yet so powerful that it shapes every experience in life. It is this: the outer world is not something separate from you. It does not exist independently of your perception. What you see, how you react, what you attract, how you interpret the events around you, all of this begins not outside, but within. The mind, the heart, the breath, these are the instruments through which reality is filtered. Therefore, the world you walk through is a mirror reflecting the inner state of your being. Many seek to fix their external circumstances. They try to control people, change jobs, escape environments, acquire things, and redesign the surface of life. But no matter how much rearranging is done on the outside, if the inner landscape remains the same, chaotic, fearful, bitter, unclear, then that same chaos appears again. It may wear a different mask, take a new form, arrive through a different doorway, but it returns. The lesson is simple. Nothing truly changes until the inner world changes first. The thoughts you entertain shape the lens through which you see. A mind filled with doubt will find reasons to hesitate. A heart burdened by past wounds will project that pain onto present moments. A restless spirit will create restlessness even in peaceful surroundings. But a calm and grounded inner world generates clarity even amid confusion. It does not mean the world outside is always quiet, but it means that the response from within is stable, centered, awake. When the inner world is untrained, it becomes reactive. It lives in defense, in fear, in constant tension. It interprets events not as they are, but as threats, as confirmations of internal stories that may no longer be relevant. But when the inner world is cultivated, when awareness is sharpened and breath is steady, then perception transforms. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to notice rather than judge. You begin to accept rather than resist. And in doing so, your outer experience begins to change, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Just as a dirty mirror cannot reflect a clear image, a clouded mind cannot perceive truth. Meditation, stillness, breathwork, these are not spiritual luxuries. They are disciplines of the inner world. They are tools that polish the lens of perception. They allow you to meet life as it is, rather than how fear, ego, or memory distort it. With clarity comes direction. With direction comes alignment. And with alignment, life begins to organize itself around your inner balance. Energy flows where attention goes, and attention flows from intention. If your inner world is filled with scattered intention, unfocused desire, unresolved emotion, then the energy that flows outward is unstable. That instability will be reflected in your outer circumstances, unpredictable relationships, short-lived motivation, half-finished tasks, repeated patterns. But when the energy within is gathered, channeled, focused, it begins to influence the world around you. You attract what matches your frequency. You repel what does not align. This is not magic, it is cause and effect. A peaceful mind sees opportunity where others see problems. A confident spirit walks into rooms differently, speaks differently, attracts different responses. An emotionally balanced individual does not need to dominate, argue, or prove. They radiate presence, and that presence changes the space they enter. The inner world shapes not only perception, but energy. And energy is what others feel before words are spoken. When one learns to cultivate the inner world, the outer world becomes less threatening. Challenges still arise, but they are no longer seen as punishments. They become teachings. Difficult people no longer feel like enemies. They become mirrors, revealing something about the self. Delays are no longer frustrations. They are pauses in rhythm, perhaps to give you time to realign. This level of perception cannot be forced. It emerges through discipline, through observation, through continuous self-inquiry. Consider the roots of a tree. They are not visible, yet they determine everything. The strength of the trunk, the reach of the branches, the health of the leaves. Without deep roots, a tree may grow quickly, but it cannot withstand storms. The same is true for people. Your visible life, your actions, habits, relationships, accomplishments is the tree. But your roots, your beliefs, your self-concept, your emotional state, your mental clarity are the unseen forces shaping everything. If the roots are neglected, no amount of surface success will bring lasting peace. There is a quiet responsibility in this truth. If the outer world reflects the inner, then no one else is to blame for your reality. Not fully. Circumstances may be out of your control, but your internal relationship to those circumstances is not. Your thoughts, your emotions, your focus, your interpretation, all of that is yours. To train the inner world is to reclaim power. Not power over others, but power over your own experience. And that is the highest form of strength. Many are waiting for life to give them peace before they feel peace. Waiting for success before they feel worthy. Waiting for approval before they feel seen. But the one who understands the principle of inner creation does not wait. They generate from within. They bring peace to their surroundings. They bring worthiness into their work. They bring presence into their interactions. This is not because they are perfect, but because they are aware of the source from which reality emerges. When the inner world is neglected, the outer world becomes noisy. It demands attention, it distracts, it pulls, it provokes. But that noise is not the problem. It is the signal that the inner instrument is out of tune. And so the work begins not by changing the music outside, but by adjusting the strings within. Breath by breath, thought by thought, moment by moment, until harmony is restored. And from that harmony, the outer world begins to shift. Let me know if you'd like the next expansion on energy conserved becomes energy directed in the same format. Human beings are born with a certain amount of energy, not only physical, but mental, emotional, and spiritual. This energy is the essence of life, the fuel for action, the power behind every thought, word, and movement. And yet, most people move through life without understanding where their energy goes or how it is spent. The untrained mind leaks energy through distraction. The undisciplined tongue leaks energy through unnecessary speech. The unguarded heart leaks energy through emotional reactivity. And over time, what is not preserved cannot be applied. Energy is wasted, focus is lost, direction becomes scattered. But energy, when conserved, begins to accumulate. It gathers strength, like water collected behind a dam. Pressure builds. But pressure without direction can become dangerous. The goal is not just to preserve energy, it is to direct it. Energy conserved becomes energy that can be shaped, aimed, and transformed into deliberate action. This is where true inner power begins, not in doing more, but in leaking less. Conservation does not mean suppression. It means awareness. It means knowing where your energy is going and choosing consciously whether it belongs there. Every interaction, every argument, every distraction, every impulsive reaction costs something. You may not see the cost immediately, but over time you begin to feel it. Fatigue without cause, irritability without reason, inconsistency in your discipline. These are not random. They are signals that your energy has been dispersed without purpose. A warrior sharpens his blade not in battle, but in stillness, in preparation, in silence. In the same way, energy is not meant to be spent constantly. It is meant to be gathered, stored, preserved in quiet moments, held in stillness. Then when the time calls for action, it is released all at once, with precision and power. This is the nature of directed energy. Not impulsive, but intentional. Not chaotic, but controlled. In traditional training, whether martial, meditative, or spiritual, there is great importance placed on retaining vital force. In every breath there is power. In every thought there is intention. In every silence there is potential. The one who squanders this power lives in exhaustion. But the one who preserves it begins to move differently. They speak less, but with more weight. They act less often, but with more impact. Their presence alone carries force. Consider how easily energy is lost. Through gossip, through overthinking, through comparison. Through explaining yourself where no explanation is needed. Through internal debates that go nowhere. Through emotional outbursts that solve nothing. Each of these moments may seem small, but collectively, they bleed the system dry. Energy does not vanish. It is transferred. The more you give to what weakens you, the less remains for what strengthens you. When energy is conserved, the body becomes lighter, the mind becomes sharper, the emotions become steadier, reaction time slows down, not in speed, but in the sense that impulsiveness is replaced by consideration. You begin to choose your response rather than being dragged by automatic reflex. That gap between stimulus and response, that pause, is where energy is either released unconsciously or held with awareness. In that space, mastery is developed. Energy directed means energy with a target. But direction is not just about goals or ambition. It is about alignment. Many pursue goals with effort, but no alignment. They push, but without center. They move forward while leaking energy sideways. They burn out. To direct energy means to align thought, breath, movement, and intention into one direction, like the point of a blade. Not flailing but cutting, not rushing, but piercing straight through the surface into the core of what must be done. This direction does not need to be dramatic. It can be simple. One task, one commitment, 1 hour of complete focus, one conversation fully present. This is how energy, when fully gathered, begins to transform not only what you do, but how you do it. The smallest actions, when infused with full presence, begin to reshape the world around you. But presence is not possible when energy is scattered. In nature, we see this principle clearly. The sun, when diffused, warms. But when concentrated through a lens, it burns. It cuts through matter. It becomes fire. Human attention is no different. When it is spread across 10 things, it brings small results. But when it is narrowed, refined, and directed toward one thing, it transforms that thing. This is why those who appear calm often carry the most force, not because they are inactive, but because they have refined their use of energy. You must become a guardian of your own energy. You must observe where it is being pulled without permission. You must close the leaks. Withdraw from what does not serve the path. Detach from what drains the spirit. Say no more often. Rest more deeply. Breathe more consciously. Reflect before speaking. Act with full intention or not at all. Every choice becomes a gate through which energy either escapes or is stored. This way of living is not one of passivity, but of economy. Every movement counts. Every word has weight. Every thought has purpose. This level of refinement brings clarity. With clarity comes focus. With focus comes momentum. With momentum comes transformation. But it begins with conservation, not as deprivation, but as preparation. The more you gather within, the more you can project without. But projection without preparation is emptiness. It is noise. It is surface without depth. To direct energy, you must first feel its presence. This requires stillness. Not the absence of motion, but the inner stillness that comes from non-reaction. The ability to hold a thought without acting on it. To feel an emotion without expressing it immediately. To wait, to watch, to hold steady. In this holding, the energy begins to build. Like breath held in the lower abdomen, it becomes a reservoir. Like water behind a dam. It becomes power waiting to be released. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Let me know when you're ready for the next keynote. When the mind settles, clarity rises. The mind, in its natural state, is not always calm. It is active, restless, constantly moving between thoughts, desires, fears, memories, and plans. Like a lake disturbed by wind, its surface becomes rippled, unable to reflect the sky. In this turbulence, nothing is clear. Truth becomes obscured. Decisions become foggy. Perception becomes distorted. But when the wind dies down, when the waters grow still, the reflection returns. So too with the mind, when it settles, clarity begins to rise. Clarity does not come from more thinking. It does not come from trying to force answers or obsessively seeking solutions. Clarity comes when thought itself slows, when the mind is not crowded by noise, when the body is not hijacked by emotion, when awareness is no longer pulled in 100 directions. In that space, what was once hidden reveals itself. Not through effort, but through presence. Not through force, but through stillness. Stillness is not inactivity. It is depth. It is the silence beneath the surface. A silence that listens. A silence that sees. The problem is not that the answers don't exist. The problem is that the noise of the mind prevents you from hearing them. They are like whispers behind a waterfall, always speaking, but drowned out by the roar. And so the practice becomes not more doing, but more undoing. Less noise, less grasping, more space. The unsettled mind is reactive. It jumps from one thought to another, driven by impulse, triggered by the past, distracted by the future. It is in a constant state of motion, but not purposeful movement, rather restlessness disguised as activity. One moment focused, the next moment drifting. One moment centered, the next moment consumed. It cannot stay in one place long enough for clarity to arise. But when the mind settles, even for a moment, the fog begins to lift. To settle the mind is not to suppress it. It is to observe without becoming entangled, like watching clouds drift across the sky without trying to shape them, without attaching to any one form. Thoughts will come. Emotions will arise, but the still mind is like a mountain. It remains unmoved. It allows but does not chase. It feels but does not grasp. In this state, awareness expands, and through that awareness, clarity emerges. Clarity is not an idea. It is a state of perception. It is seeing what is without distortion. It is the absence of confusion, not because everything is known, but because there is no longer resistance to not knowing. It is not always a matter of having answers, but of being in the right relationship with the question. A clear mind does not demand certainty. It rests in the presence of what is unfolding without trying to control it. This clarity becomes the foundation for action. It informs choices. It brings precision to words. It reveals the essence beneath appearances. It removes the layers of story, assumption, and fear that cloud the way. When the mind is settled, decisions are made from a place of grounded knowing, not from panic or pressure. The energy that was once wasted in inner conflict is now available for focused direction. The path to a settled mind is not complex, but it requires discipline. Breath becomes the anchor. The body becomes the vessel. Stillness becomes the training ground. Sitting in silence, even as the mind races, teaches patience. Observing the breath, even when distracted, teaches return. Over time, the waves grow smaller. The space between thoughts becomes wider. And in those spaces, clarity rises like sunlight breaking through the morning mist. What obscures clarity is not lack of knowledge, but too much noise, mental noise, emotional static, sensory overload. The world constantly demands attention, constantly feeds the mind with stimulation. But inner clarity is not nourished by more information. It is nourished by depth, by stillness, by returning again and again to the present moment. Not just with the body, but with the entire being. When the mind settles, awareness becomes sharper. One begins to notice subtleties that were previously missed. The tension in the breath, the tone behind a word, the emotion beneath the surface of a thought. In this heightened awareness, even simple things become profound. A step, a sound, a gesture, nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. Time stretches, space opens. And within that space, wisdom begins to arise, not as something added, but as something uncovered. In traditions of martial discipline, the importance of stillness is not separate from action. Before movement, there is grounding. Before the strike, there is awareness. Before the decision, there is emptiness. A mind that is always moving cannot perceive timing. It cannot read the room. It cannot feel the rhythm. But a settled mind perceives everything. Not by trying harder, but by becoming still enough to receive what is already there. Clarity that comes from a settled mind is unshakable. It is not easily swayed by the emotions of others. It does not rush to judgment, does not react out of habit. It pauses, it sees, It waits for the right moment to move. And when it moves, it does so with precision. There is no wasted energy, no unnecessary force, only presence, pure, grounded, awake. In this way, the settled mind becomes a mirror. It reflects reality rather than distorting it. It reflects the truth of a moment rather than projecting fear or desire onto it. And because it reflects clearly, it moves clearly. Thought becomes aligned with action. Action becomes aligned with intention. Intention becomes aligned with the rhythm of life itself. When the mind is agitated, it creates friction. That friction becomes suffering, not because the world is against you, but because the mind is against itself. But when the mind quiets, that friction dissolves. And what remains is not emptiness, but openness. Not numbness, but heightened sensitivity. The kind of sensitivity that does not break you, but reveals you to yourself and to the world around you